Boy, have we got to talk about UFC 300. The buzz is still real. The buzz is still absolutely real. You can still feel it flowing through your veins. If you watched last night from beginning to end. Now, I was not able to watch every single fight. Unfortunately, I had other obligations, but we can go through most of the fights and talk about my prediction relative to what actually happened. Overall, it was a pretty good night. Granted, MMA is a very tough sport to predict, and sometimes the results that we get are actually better than the results that we predict. And last night was certainly one of those cases, I think, overall for my predictions. I'm certainly happy with the outcomes of the fights. Very, very entertaining, high stakes. And we got some, I think, in almost every case, we got the matchup, we got the result that we wanted. And I'll explain why. Starting off with Davis and Figueiredo beating Cody Garbrandt. Now, we predicted this one. It was one of the easier predictions, I believe, of the night that Figueiredo would win. Figueiredo won in what was really a great way for him. The jiu-jitsu battle is a clear advantage for Figueiredo. Typically, the lighter weight classes are actually more technical because they have to be more technical in the jiu-jitsu game because they're lighter. So they don't have the brute strength to rely on. So they have to be extremely, extremely sound. Technically, Davis and Figueiredo had many points at 125 pounds where he looked really slick on the ground. Also in transitions with using trips. And I believe he's used that same trip that he used to pull Cody Garbrandt back by putting his leg under Garbrandt's legs. I believe he's used that same type of trip at 125, and now he used it against Garbrandt at 135. And then ultimately, Cody Garbrandt didn't really put up too much of a fight once he was on his back. Figueiredo really got that choke pretty easily. It looked like Garbrandt even sort of like lifted his neck up. He kind of wanted out at that point. So a pretty easy one. Cody Garbrandt on the mental side is completely done. He's completely shot. Very, very difficult to have, first of all, a lack of a chin to the point where you get knocked out several times pretty badly in fights. He also has problems cutting weight down to 125, where it could possibly be the best weight class for him if he was able to get there healthy, but he has a lot of health issues. He's brittle. He has no chin, and he has to now also get past the mental game where he used to be all the way at the top, and he outclassed one of the greatest bantamweights of all time when he beat Dominic Cruz, and now he's just a guy who's been knocked out a whole bunch of times. He's back down. He's been beat so many times that it's just a mental hurdle that's almost impossible for him to get over, not to mention he's not exactly the brightest bulb in the room. So you have many things working against Cody Garbrandt, and I believe that was a very easy prediction for us. We also predicted that Figueiredo would not get the 300K bonus, and that's because they're so early on, and also it's the type of thing where it didn't seem like there would have to be an otherworldly knockout for Figueiredo to get the performance of the night or fight of the night or any type of bonus in order for him to get it when he's literally fighting in the first fight of the night. And by the time everything was all said and done, all of the bonuses went to the fighters all the way at the end. Now, Dana White did say that he would also take care of other fighters, but we'll get to that as we continue going up the fighting ranks. Then we had Bobby Green beating Jim Miller, so 2 for 2. We expected that to happen as well. Seems like Jim Miller got a pretty bad beating, and we expected that coming from Bobby Green. We expected that Bobby Green was going to go for the 300K bonuses. Unfortunately for him, he didn't get it, fighting very, very early on in the card, and rightfully so that he didn't get it. Then you had Andrade beating Marina Rodriguez. We're not going to talk about that one whatsoever. Then you had Moicano getting the comeback victory against Jalen Turner. And I picked Jalen Turner in this fight, and I still believe that was the correct pick, because to pick Moicano to win in the way that he won is kind of a prediction that you would never really want to make. You would want to go with the guy in Jalen Turner who showed that incredible front kick, that teep kick, however you want to call it, the one that really hurt Moicano a couple of times badly in the first round. And then also Jalen Turner caught him with the big overhand, which sent Moicano to the canvas. And Moicano was able to pop up pretty quickly, but there was a slight stumble. He didn't completely have his legs under him when he stood up from being knocked down by that vicious overhand from Turner. And Turner definitely, had he followed up, would have had a great chance at ending the fight right then and there. But then in the second round, Moicano was able to get the better of him and get on top, and it's sort of just unraveled very quickly. And it wasn't like Jalen Turner really took any big shots on the ground. Most of the shots were blocked if you watch the replays back. But unfortunately for him, he didn't do anything to protect himself. He looked like he was barely alive. And if you refuse to protect yourself or show that you are making a move to protect yourself, well, then the referee is going to come in and do that job for you, because that's literally the referee's job, to protect the fighter. So unfortunately for Jalen Turner, this is going to be a massive learning experience for him, and I still believe Jalen Turner will come back better for sure. This is a great learning opportunity for him, and he's going to come back stronger in the future. This is not the type of loss where you say, hey, how could I have possibly won this fight? I have no chance at moving up in the division and taking on bigger and better opponents. He certainly does. And it was very within Jalen Turner's purview to win this fight against Moicano. So I do not regret picking Jalen Turner to win this fight whatsoever. I think he could have won, and I think he could have won by knockout or TKO. But the veteran gets the victory. So Moicano able to get it, good for him. He's able to say, hey, I'm the better fighter, although really, is he the better fighter? It's quite debatable, and he really could have lost the fight. Then you have Diego Lopez getting the easy victory against Sadiq Youssef. This one was never within doubt. Now, Diego Lopez unfortunately didn't get the 300K bonus, but Dana White did put him on the list of guys who he said he would be taking care of and make sure that they leave the arena happy. So at least you have that for Diego Lopez. Now, I don't know if that means that Lopez is getting 50K or if he's going to get an extra 10 or 20K. I don't know exactly all of the ways that the UFC tries to... So when they say that, when Dana says that he's taking care of a fighter, how much is that? But at least he's getting something, considering that he did get a KO within the first, the first minute and a half of the round. So that's pretty impressive, and you would hope that he would get rewarded for doing that on a big stage and looking so dominant. But at least he's getting something for it. Then you have the Kayla Harrison beating Holly Holm. We're not going to really talk about this one. We said that Kayla Harrison would beat Holly Holm. We predicted that correctly, and we also predicted that she would not be getting one of the 300K bonuses. Now, this starts the ones that we started to get wrong. We got the Calvin Kattar against Aljamain Sterling fight wrong. I thought that Calvin Kattar would be able to keep Sterling at bay and the jiu-jitsu wouldn't be such a negative for Kattar, but Sterling able to show that he can get the victory. But overall, I'm very happy with this outcome because I think it's a lot better for the guys moving up to get the victories, because where can Calvin Kattar really go? Calvin Kattar got absolutely brutalized by Max Holloway already, and Holloway can still move back down at 145, and Calvin Kattar's lost to other guys as well. It's not like, if we pull up the career of Calvin Kattar, it's not like Calvin Kattar really has a realistic shot, or at least conventional wisdom is going to say that he doesn't have a realistic shot, considering that he's already lost to not just Sterling, but now he's lost to Arnold Allen, Josh Emmett, and also Max Holloway. And he was really getting beat from pillar to post by Giga Chikadze until Giga sort of blew his wad. And then he also lost way back to Zabit, and he also lost to Renato Moicano going even further back. So there's been many losses for Calvin Kattar. Now, Calvin Kattar has also had times where he looked really good, but unfortunately, he's the caliber of fighter he's beat. He beat Ige, he beat Jeremy Stevens, he beat Ricardo Lamas, Chris Fishgold. He beat Shane Burgos, Andre Fili, but he really hasn't beaten that upper echelon of fighter. He's kind of only been able to get up to the 7-8 range, and that's really just about it. Maybe you can technically say he got a little higher than that. Maybe he got to 4 or 5 at one point, but he's never really beat that level of opposition all the way up at the top of the division. There's kind of been a certain step that Calvin Kattar has never been able to pass. And even against Giga Chikadze really was the better fighter, but Calvin Kattar was the tougher fighter and the more veteran fighter who was able to win based on Giga sort of losing it towards the end, losing it in the gas tank department and not being able to keep up that pressure that he was able to keep up on, that he was able to throw on Kattar at the beginning. So considering that Calvin Kattar can't really have championship aspirations at this point, it's more exciting for the division for Sterling to step up there and get the victory. And it goes the same way for Deiveson Figueiredo, who fought on the first fight of the night, where Cody Garbrandt isn't making another run at the title. So it behooves us, the fans, for Figueiredo and Sterling to win going up, because now it at least presents a possibility of a new contender in the division. Figueiredo can now keep moving up, and he can be a potential championship contender at 135. And now that Sterling has moved up to 145 and he got a victory, he can potentially be a championship contender at 145. So this really works out in the favor of the fans, and it works out in favor of the storylines, where you have these guys who can potentially now still go for titles, whereas Kattar was already not going to ever get a title. And Garbrandt was already not going to get back to the title at bantamweight. That just wasn't something that was ever going to happen. And now it definitely has a chance of happening for Sterling, and it has a chance of happening for Figueiredo, which makes it much more interesting for us, the fans. So it's certainly an outcome that I'm happy with. Although I predicted that it would go the other way, and hey, I'm very happy to say that it didn't go that way, and Aljamain Sterling got the victory. Then we went back into the W column where we correctly predicted that Yuri would get the victory, and that's because Yuri hasn't really lost to anybody except for all the way at the top. And Yuri has a hell of a chin, which we knew, and Yuri, when he gets into that dominant, aggressive sort of way, he has just a great flow on the offensive. Now, his defense leaves a lot to be desired. He gets cracked in almost every fight that he's in, but he's able to take it, so that bodes well for him in almost every matchup except for when he fights Alex Pereira. And he's just fighting against a certain type of power coming back his way where there's only so much you can take. Now, is it still possible for Yuri to beat Pereira? I believe it is possible, but Yuri needs to get on the total offensive and just land and land and land and land. Certainly, it's going to be a tough matchup for him if he ever has to fight Pereira again. It's certainly a matchup that Pereira should feel very confident in. But hey, Yuri did what he had to do, and he's still one of those top fighters there at the light heavyweight weight class right there, and he's right back in it, and that's exactly what we thought would happen. Then Bo Nickel got the submission victory over Cody Brundage, which we also predicted. I thought he would do it even quicker than he did, but Cody Brundage did show, I believe, the most flaws in Bo Nickel's game that we've ever seen in the game of Bo Nickel, because Bo Nickel had a couple of times where he sort of went total wrestling, and he dipped his head, and then you start to look at that and you think, hey, that's certainly an opportunity where fighting against a certain type of striker who's higher than the level of a 10-6 Cody Brundage, that's the type of thing where someone could take advantage and catch Bo Nickel dropping his head, which has happened many times. We saw this happen to Marco Madsen. We saw this happen to the guy who Kevin Lee knocked out viciously with the head kick. Well, what was that guy's name? He was a real killer coming up. He was a ruthless guy. I'll pull up Kevin Lee's record, and we will see what the name of that fighter was. This was probably the best victory of Kevin Lee's career when he knocked out, who was it? Gregor Gillespie. Gillespie was another guy who had that ruthless wrestling style, but as soon as you caught him dipping his head, that was exactly what Kevin Lee was able to do, is he was able to fling that kick up there, and he viciously knocked Gregor Gillespie out and sent his head and his entire body and consciousness along with it flying into the cage for an incredible knockout. So you definitely see that, hey, if Bo Nickel would fight against an Adesanya, or if Bo Nickel would fight against a Pereira, is there a possibility that they could catch him dipping and catch a knee, or catch Bo Nickel with a knee or with a head kick? It's certainly it's in the realm of possibility now, and we never really saw that it was in the realm of possibility up until last night, where Cody Brundage showed, hey, this is a guy who is potentially beatable. So regardless, Bo Nickel gets the victory, and he's going to continue to move up, and we'll see if he can shore up any holes in his game as he continues his slow but steady rise to superstardom. Then you had another one that we predicted correctly. So we predicted almost every fight correctly up till this point. We had Arman Tsarukyan getting the victory over Charles Oliveira, and I thought he would be able to do it pretty easily. I thought that Arman was the better fighter, the more sound fighter. Charles presents like a stick of dynamite, a guy who is a live dog, but we predicted that Tsarukyan would get the victory. It got a little dicey for him at one point, but Tsarukyan doesn't really have a neck, and based on some of his maneuvers there, he seems to be able to do things in a certain beastly way that a lot of guys wouldn't be able to do. It seems like his testosterone is off the charts. This is just a guy who's going to be very hard to put away, a guy who's all in on his training, and he's very technically sound, and he sometimes is boring, but he also has that knockout ability that he showed against Beneil Dariush, and he's able to get the victory. And now for Arman, it's going to be a little bit tough, because who's Arman going to fight? He's not going to fight against Poirier, because Poirier is now booked to fight Islam. Well, he's also not going to fight against Islam, because Islam is booked to fight against Poirier. So who is Tsarukyan going to fight? He's going to have to maybe wait for that championship fight to happen, or maybe he'll have to wait and fight against the Justin Gaethje, who we're going to get to right now. Now, Justin Gaethje, we predicted would beat Max Holloway. I thought he would get it done probably by decision. I thought that Holloway would land more shots, but that Gaethje would land the most impactful shots in each round, and it would be very similar to when Max Holloway fought against Dustin Poirier. Now, the difference here is that I saw some really good analysis on this one from MMA Guru, and it's quite simple. It's really not something that was so brilliant or something that we couldn't have seen had I watched more footage, but it was something that when I heard the MMA Guru say it, it really just made so much sense. And very often fighting is simple. Fighting is not always such a complicated sport. Very often it's simple instruction that makes its way to the head of the fighter that makes a big impact. Very often it's one adjustment in the game plan that can switch an entire fight going from being knocked out to getting the knockout. And in this case, Justin Gaethje, he does like to stand and throw, and he likes to throw set. And also, he likes to throw in 2 punches. He likes to think about that Tony Ferguson fight where Justin Gaethje absolutely demolished Ferguson and changed the rest of his career forever, altered the career of Tony Ferguson, and it never went back the other way, so far at least, and it probably never will, just because of that one epic performance by Gaethje. It was all Ferguson coming in, Gaethje throwing, dodging, and then throwing a 2-punch combination coming back. Hook, right hand, hook. That was really it. Jab, right hand. That was what Gaethje was doing, and he was just settled into the pocket. Ferguson was happy to oblige with him and try to rack up the volume, but he ended up taking such vicious shots coming back that it changed his entire career and ended up breaking his win streak and turning it into the beginning of a massive losing streak. But Holloway didn't fight him in that way at all. Holloway was very mobile. Holloway had a lot of more mobile strikes, spinning strikes. He was able to throw knees up there. Holloway was able to use the uppercut coming in a way where Gaethje couldn't just stand there and trade. And yes, Gaethje did probably deserve to get the knockdown in round 4. But outside of that, Holloway was able to, first of all, not get too badly affected at all. Holloway popped right up, and he seemed to be completely lucid, and he was totally himself immediately after getting knocked down in round 4 by Gaethje. And Holloway was able to not get hit by anything vicious for the rest of the fight. And if you can go 5 rounds, if you can fight 25 minutes, or should I say 24 minutes and 59 seconds against Justin Gaethje and only get really badly hit one time, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing, because Gaethje is such a good striker. Now, granted, Holloway did eye poke Gaethje a couple of times, but the main damage that Holloway did was with the spinning kick to the face where he broke Gaethje's nose. And then Holloway also landed a million incredible shots against Gaethje where he really badly hurt Gaethje. So you have to give all the credit to Holloway. Yes, it would have been nice if there weren't the eye pokes as well, but that's sort of, unfortunately, it's a part of the game, and unfortunately it happened, but it didn't seem like that was really what ruined the night for Gaethje. It wasn't like Holloway did the eye pokes and then immediately after they resumed action, Holloway got landed the spinning kick, or Holloway got the knockout, or Holloway landed a head kick that changed the trajectory of the fight. So at least that didn't happen. At least it wasn't like the fight ended off of one of those sequences like it did in the Chris Weidman fight recently, where Weidman just totally clawed at the eyes of Bruno Silva, and then the fight ended immediately after, and you just have to say, well, hey, he eye-poked his way to victory. At least Holloway took it all the way till the end, and then got the KO at the end, and Holloway didn't need the KO. So in this, that's what just made it so incredible. Holloway's like, we're just going to throw down, and then he gets this epic KO, and my eyes almost popped out of my head. I'm telling you, my wife was watching, saw the look on my face. I was in the middle of, I was watching the fight while I was feeding Cheerios and milk to my daughter. And I had the phone with the fight crystal clear. I was watching it on the phone. I had it sitting on my knees as I was taking the spoon and putting it into this cup of Cheerios and milk and feeding it to my daughter. And I saw the Holloway point at the canvas, and he said, we're going to throw down right here, right now. And in the exchange, it looked like Holloway did get hit by a shot, but Holloway able to roll back and forth and pivot side to side and get so much torque and so much leverage into those shots. And he was throwing several shots, whereas Gaethje, again, wanted to go with a 2-punch combo. So actually in the extended exchange, where you would think that at the center of the octagon, if you're just going to throw down and bang, you would think that it would benefit Gaethje. It actually turns out to benefit Holloway, because Holloway is throwing more punches in bunches than Gaethje, and he was able to go 2, 3, 4, 5-punch combination, whereas Gaethje really likes to settle in and get the 2-punch combination reset, and it just never worked out that way, because when you're throwing that many punches in rapid succession, it really ended up benefiting Holloway, and it created one of the greatest moments in UFC history where Holloway got the knockout that he didn't need and put away a KO artist like Justin Gaethje. Absolutely incredible to think about the trajectory of where things have gone, because Dustin Poirier fought Max Holloway and beat him early in his career. Then Dustin Poirier beat Max Holloway again at 155 when Max tried to move up. So all of the data is pointing in the direction that Justin Gaethje, who just beat and KO'd Dustin Poirier at 155, welcoming Max back up to 155, you would think that Gaethje for sure should be able to beat Max Holloway. after Gaethje just beat Poirier. And it totally didn't go that way. Not only did Max Holloway beat Gaethje, he knocked him out, he styled on him, and he dominated the fight, winning 4 out of the 5 rounds on virtually everyone's scorecards. And then still getting the KO at the end when he didn't even need it, and showing that he has the power to beat a guy like Justin Gaethje. He didn't just beat him with volume, he beat him with power. Wow, one of the most incredible performances I've ever seen. And it really is very rewarding, especially considering that one of the first great fighters that I was following when I came into to watching UFC and MMA as a whole was when it was around the time where Max Holloway was on the rise. So there was always a connection that I had to enjoying watching Max Holloway. And Max always is able to say the right thing, and he always says that thing that just makes him so marketable. For example, in the post-fight, Max says that he's the BMF, and in his mind, that stands for Blessed Man Forever. It's just so classic Max Holloway, the BMF, not Baddest Mother Effer, it's Blessed Man Forever. Just hilarious stuff coming from the side of Max Holloway. He's always able to say something, whether it's in victory or whether it's in defeat, whether it's the cupcake remark, whether it's the salty clan remark, whether it's the blessed man forever remark, whether it's I'm him, he's always able to come up with just the right thing to say at the right time. And the fans loved him. The fans loved Holloway even more than Gaethje. Holloway was getting most of the applause even in round 1 of that fight. And Gaethje is a real fan favorite. But where I think Gaethje is the favorite purely because of his fight style, Max, I believe, is the fan favorite because not only the fight style, but also because of his marketability and his personality and the way he connects in the cage and also out of the cage. So Max has that advantage. He's marketable in the cage with his fighting style. He's marketable out of the cage with the way he talks and his demeanor and the way he handles himself. So he's the ultimate marketable fighter, and not to mention, especially coming off of this, and he's been an interim champ, a regular champ, and also a BMF champ in the most crazy fashion that you could ever imagine. This is a once-in-a-lifetime fighter, and we're definitely going to miss him when it's all said and done, and I hope we get at least 3, 4, 5 more incredible fights from Max Holloway before he ends up calling it quits. Then we had the absolute come-down fight where it was Weili Zhang versus Yan Xiaonan. I thought Weili would win, but I don't really care. It didn't look particularly good for Weili because despite the fact that she sort of blew her wad and then she was unable to finish the fight, and she was totally exhausted, and she got knocked down several times, and still Yan Xiaonan wasn't able to win the fight. That makes it look really bad for Yan Xiaonan. And the fact that Weili got knocked down so many times by Yan Xiaonan also looks bad for Weili. So it's a fight where it doesn't really make either woman look good, but hey, Weili just retains the title. I really think we need a complete changing of the guard. We need a new savior of women's MMA, and it'll be really exciting when that happens, when that next Ronda Rousey character, and I'm not saying that Ronda was a complete fighter, but I mean it in the sense of the next woman who we have who comes along and can do what Conor McGregor did, or who can come along and be sharper than all the women and can be like an Amanda Nunes, or maybe if you get like a real knockout artist like a Sugar Sean O'Malley type in a woman who just comes in and changes the game like a Caitlin Clark is doing in women's basketball. Like when we can get that, that'll be a very exciting time, and hopefully with that savior of women's MMA, who we thought maybe could have been Rose Namajunas, but then she had some really bewildering performances. We thought that it could have been her with the way that she beat Joanna, but no, it seems like it's not her, and Nunes retiring and Valentina coming up on the end of it here. We kind of need a whole changing of the guard in the women's divisions in order for us to become really interested in their fights again. And then, of course, in the final fight of the night, this was the other one that I got wrong. So it was really the ones in the fights that I got wrong. It was the Aljo getting the victory I didn't get correctly, and it was the Jalen Turner I got incorrect, but I still feel good about that prediction. And then it was also the Max Holloway. I didn't think he would be able to do it the way he did, but I certainly am happy about it. And then the one that really made me look bad is the Alex Pereira against Jamal Hill. And it's the type of thing where had I been able to do more research, I think it's possible I would have switched over to the Pereira side, because that's what everyone seems to be saying. It seems like anyone who watched all of the Pereira fights back and all of the Hill fights back did pick Alex Pereira, and it seemed like guys like Jimmy Smith even, he said Pereira's going to win this fight easy. Whereas I thought Jamal Hill was intelligent enough to know what he's going up against. And unfortunately, it went the same way the Strickland fight went. It wasn't even a fight. It wasn't even a contest. It ended so quickly that it's like, is Jamal Hill is Sean Strickland missing something in the way that they prepared for this fight? Did they underestimate what that left hook would be? Because it doesn't seem like they should have underestimated that. It seemed like had they watched back the career of Alex Pereira and they had to prepare for one thing, that would be the thing that they should have to prepare for. But hey, I guess I also underestimated Alex Pereira because he's stepping in the cage with these guys, and it doesn't seem like anyone can even hang with him except for Adesanya in that one fight, where really Adesanya hung with him in both fights that he had in the UFC, and really in all the fights that Pereira and Adesanya have had together. It seemed like Adesanya is the one guy in kickboxing and in MMA who can hang with Pereira. So very interesting, and certainly I'm not going to underestimate Pereira again, and I'm certainly not going to overestimate the opponents of Alex Pereira and their ability to stop his left hook, because it just doesn't seem like it's anything anyone else has seen. The speed and the accuracy, the precision, and the knockout ability of that strike just seems to land every single time, and that's something that we'll have to take into account moving forward. From here on out, where do we go from here? Next week's fights are definitely going to be a bit of a letdown, a bit of a come down off of these fights. UFC 301 we have coming up in 2 weeks, so we'll have the Pantoja versus Urseg, and then we'll have a couple of other good fights on that card, but certainly it's not going to be nearly as good as this one was. So for the time being, we're just going to continue to bask in the glory of this fight, of this UFC 300. Maybe we'll put out a few more podcasts about UFC 300 as we continue to talk about Holloway, and we can continue to elaborate on future matchups. This is the Straight Up Fight Network.